We're now absolutely delighted to hand over to René Banglesdorf. You may know her as Charlie Bravo Aviation, but that was the old René. And today, we have the Aviation Collective.
Thanks, Al. Well, thanks, everyone. That leads right into how I wanted to introduce myself to you today, because you may be looking at the title of my presentation going, what in the world does an aircraft broker know about workforce development? But I want to kind of introduce the new thing that I'm doing and let you know that I have been training as a professional business coach for the last 2 years. I've worked with companies in 60 different industries, and it's been very interesting to see what's developed during that time. I do presentations, talk to people all over the world about that. I also have a few things that might qualify me to know about the next generation of aviators. One is a daughter who's a pilot. The second is a son-in-law who's an A&P. The third is a son who's in aircraft management. And then finally, Clara as a pilot. She does love airplanes. Fascinated. George, my grandson, was Peter Pan. The other thing that qualifies me to talk about this today is that in May of 2020, I was appointed by the then Secretary of Transportation to the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And we have spent the last year and a half looking at why there are so few women in aviation and aerospace. This was actually a charter from US Congress to determine why this is an issue in our industry. And it's really been very interesting to look at that, because I think that what will help more women be attracted to this industry will help more people be attracted to this industry. And we found a few things that are keeping women out of the industry. Some of them are cost. Some of them are not being introduced to the industry. So the objective of the Women in Aviation Advisory Board is to develop and provide independent recommendations and strategies to encourage female students. And as I mentioned, the #1 issue for that is workplace culture. So the first is quality of life. We've talked about this. Michael McCauley mentioned to me earlier today that he had a female pilot, fantastic pilot, who then was ready to have a baby and was going to go on maternity leave. And he invested in her and promoted for her to become his director of maintenance, because it's very difficult to fly and have a family. Not impossible. There's a lack of mentors and role models. The International Aviation Women's Association and Oliver Wyman partnered together late last year, early this year, to look at the detractors for women being promoted within the industry. And one of the things that they found is that there's a lack of mentorship, of sponsorship, of allyship, and even role models. And I want to applaud you, Alistair. I think you're the best in the industry at putting diverse groups on stage. And I think it's important. There's a lot of evidence that shows that if you can see it, you can be it. And if we don't see women in roles of authority and contribution in aviation, then young women don't believe that that's something that they can do. A lot of times we hear that there's not a clear career path for women, or that there's not, or millennials or Gen Zs in the industry, or that there's not professional development to help them get to the next level. And then there is perceived harassment and discrimination, and there is actual harassment and discrimination. And some of these things are very small, and some of them are very strange. I learned that the requirements or the guidelines for medical exams in order to become a pilot have not changed since World War II. So the things that were required for men who had probably never been to the doctor in their life when they became a pilot in World War II are still the same guidelines that we use for medical exams in the US today. It states that a doctor can examine any part to any extent that he or she wants on a potential pilot in order for them to receive their medical. It's kind of unusual, and it's a detractor for women getting into the field. There are other things that happen. There are a few Facebook groups where horror stories are told of discrimination and sexual harassment and assault that happen. And this is something that doesn't really keep women from coming into the industry, but definitely kicks women out of the industry or encourages them to leave the industry. So the good news in examining all of what we've been looking at, and I'm on the board with just a couple of other people from general aviation or business aviation, quite a few women who are in the airline industry. And the airlines are doing a few things right now to scramble to bring more people into the workforce. They're starting flight schools, they're giving scholarships, and they're doing a lot to attract talent, especially pilots and technicians, to the workforce. And it's been said several times that they pull out of business aviation. So I think that we need to do some things to become better at attracting and retaining our talent. The good news is that business aviation is very nimble. I've seen this over the years doing disaster relief, and I know Don's here, and we've used his hangar for some of that. But business aviation can react very quickly. A lot of us have smaller companies, and we're able to make changes without an act of Congress or a lengthy union negotiation. But it's not going to be easy. So this year, I learned how to fly. I got my pilot's license. I started on May 2nd. I passed my check ride on June 3rd. I went out to Sacramento, California, and I spent 95 hours in the Cessna 172 learning how to fly. And when I practiced, thank you, Kurt, for letting me be gone that long to learn how to fly. I appreciate that. When I practiced short field takeoffs and landings, we went into the foothills of the Sierras, and this was the little airport that I learned how to do my short field takeoffs and landings at. It's called Georgetown, which made me feel right at home since I'm from Georgetown, Texas. But the thing that my instructor taught me, the thing that kept running through my head over and over again as I was coming in on this base to final, was that you have to be a quarter mile ahead of your aircraft. If you want a smooth landing, you can't be looking at where you're landing. You have to be anticipating what you're doing a quarter mile out. And the same is very, very true for us. As we're all scrambling to close deals before the end of the year, and we're scrambling to put different procedures and business plans in place for 2022, anticipating that we're still going to be as busy, we need to be addressing the future health of our company at the same time. So in the same learning how to fly theme, I've come up with some things that we can do as an industry and as leaders in our individual companies in order to take us into a different place in the future, to arrive at a new destination, if you will. For those of you who are pilots in the room or aeronautical engineers, you'll recognize that these are the 4 forces of flight, right? Lift, thrust, gravity or weight, and drag. But I think that there are some applicable business concepts that I've seen across all sorts of industries that help us change our workplace culture. The first, with Lift, we have what is called an affinity group. Some people call these employee resource groups. I've heard that the FAA calls them employee association groups. These are groups within a large organization where people who have things in common come together and really bond over those things and feel a part of a community in their business. For those of us who have smaller businesses, it's great to have events like this where you can gain a sense of belonging. Also important for your younger employees to have groups where they can feel like they're a part of the community and really don't feel isolated, even if they're working very hard and are isolated to some extent at work. Professional development is also very important, and sponsorship, which is a person kind of sticking their neck out for someone else in the industry or within the organization to help pull them up, or mentorship, which can be formal or informal. So LIFT is elevating, the theme of these activities is elevating your employees, and that needs to start at the very beginning of their career within your organization. Second is thrust. Thrust are things like resources, fuel, if you're actually flying, policy reform, air, and catalyst, a spark. So in order to make my little Lycoming engine go in the airplane that I learned to fly in, fuel, air, and a spark. So resources, it's money, it's time, it's investment in your employees to keep them engaged in your business. Employees who are more engaged are much more likely to stay in the industry and with your company. Policy reform, like the AME guidelines that I discussed earlier. Another thing that was discussed here earlier today is safety. Safety is incredibly important, and we've known for years that when there's a punitive consequence to reporting a safety infraction, people don't report. And the same thing, if someone feels uncomfortable at work and there's not a way to change that, to challenge that, to speak up about that, they're more likely to exit than they are to stay in the organization. It's been all over the news, the Great Resignation. Over the last 4 to 6 months, people are leaving because they don't feel comfortable in their job or they want something different. If we have a mechanism to receive that feedback, I think we can create a lot of change in our organization. And finally, a catalyst. There are all sorts of catalysts. There are safety catalysts that happen that cause us to change. There are employee shortage catalysts that cause us to change. And I think we're at one of those right now. So we're at the perfect combination to get some forward momentum in the industry with workplace change. Finally, gravity, or third, gravity is something that's very important. Weight helps you land an aircraft where you want it to land. And we need to have a purpose and a mission for our company. The reason is that it helps us get to a destination. I have a friend who says that getting in the car is not going to help you arrive at a destination if you haven't figured out where you're going. So it's really important to have purpose and mission. More important for our millennial and Gen Z employees, even than the employees that we have that are from my generation. They want to be aligned with a purpose and a mission. And if that mission is making the owner a lot of money, that's not something that they typically get on board with. They like to be a part of change or innovation or adventure or some other exciting social venture. So that's the third one. And finally, drag is not being a party pooper. It's not dragging in here early this morning to listen to the early morning sessions after lots of cocktails last night. Drag is created by the control surfaces of an airplane, and the correlation to business is alignment and accountability. If you think about making small alignment changes with your control surfaces as you're flying, adjusting the trim, tweaking the yoke a little bit to stay on your heading, if you are constantly adjusting alignment and you're holding people accountable for the goals that you've set, you'll be able to create a great deal of momentum in your company. In fact, you'll have stability and you'll be able to arrive in the most fuel-efficient manner straight and level on your way to your destination. So those are the 4 areas where I think we need to pay attention in order to change our workplace culture. And remember, we need to stay a quarter mile ahead of our airplane. Do we have any questions, Sal?
Do we have any from the audience? Any questions from the audience? René, very quickly, what does the Aviation Collective offer?
The Aviation Collective is a professional coaching company. So I'm taking the training that I've received outside of the industry. I believe that we need a tremendous amount of professional development and coaching within the industry. So I do executive coaching on a one-on-one basis, as I do with a number of clients in other industries, and then also have a membership for mid-tier young professionals, teaching them professional skills that they need, goal setting, vision setting, accountability, delegation, how to be in a meeting or run a meeting, those types of skills that as an executive you may or may not have time to invest in your employees.
Brilliant.
So,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.